Hi, we're back in downtown Los Angeles where we are continuing our Showdown in Downtown series. We are looking at the race for sheriff, and last week we brought you part one of the debate being put on by the League of Women Voters and the ACLU. Tonight, part two. All of this and Lou Vince speaks to us after the debate, coming up right after the credits. Hi, and welcome to Newswire LA. I'm your host, Chin Thomasangsi. Tonight, we're showing you part two of a debate that began in our last broadcast. The debate is being held here in downtown Los Angeles and is put on by the ACLU and the League of Women Voters. The debate features 5 of the 7 candidates for sheriff. They have been answering questions for about the past 35 minutes, and they will continue. We're going to take you back inside right now, and we're going to get right back to it. Joining us after the debate will be a familiar face here on Newswire LA, Lou Vince. We'll get his comments on what it's like to debate these people and how he feels about where he stands in this race so far. Stay tuned, and we'll be back shortly.
The county supervisors want to increase jail capacity to increase the time served by some prisoners. What is your attitude toward jail expansion for the purpose of increasing the percentage of the sentence served? Mr. Rogers, your 2-minute response, please.
We have a couple of issues there. We have the influx of inmates from the state prisons through AB 109. We also, as I mentioned earlier, have the worst of the county inmates serving only 40% of their time. I think that's too little. I think it's unacceptable. I think if they're sentenced to a certain amount of time in custody, they ought to serve that time unless they properly earn credits for rehabilitation, reentry programs. We need to have maximum flexibility to manage our jail population, but as I also said earlier, incarceration is not the only solution. We need prevention, intervention, rehabilitation. We need to have that continuum of services within the jail system to make sure that we reduce our recidivism rate. It's our obligation to make sure that when these inmates are in our custody, that we're doing the best we can to make them productive citizens when they return to society and not come back into our custody.
I think we discussed this a little bit already. Like I said, our jail has been overcrowded for years and years and years. The biggest impact we're going to have to lessen the overcrowding so we can have inmates that need to be there longer is to deal with the mentally ill. Right now, those that go to jail spend about 10% of their time, and that's it. Those that truly need to be locked up, we need to create the bed space for them. I can create bed space by looking at 15 to 20% of the mentally ill and having this mentally ill court as a as a post-booking process where they actually come in and be interviewed by the mental health, by the PD, by the DA, and be able to divert them immediately back into a mental health program. That would be the one immediate way to do that.
We need to have the ability to be able to have sentenced inmates serve a period of time that at least provides a disincentive to the behavior that got them there in the first place. However, we need re-entry programs during that period of time so that people leave in a better condition than they came in. Bob touched on the issue of housing or incarcerating the mentally ill because we don't have an alternative to that right now. If 20% of the bed space can be freed up by addressing this issue, then we may not have the need to be able to do what the board was looking at doing. What we do need is community-based mental health clinics so we can on the front end be able to triage and treat people who have illnesses that would otherwise cause them to be incarcerated. That's not a humane way of treating somebody who's dealing with an illness. Thank you.
Actually, I would tear down MCJ. That building would be gone and we wouldn't have that place anymore. And I would spend the new funding on alternatives to custody. Alternatives being education, rehabilitation, and building people up as opposed to tearing people down where they're learning that in those institutions. And that's what I'm adamant about. That's why I keep repeating it over and over. And so, no, I will not seek to actually increase sentences unless we're talking about violent offenders. All of us want to make sure that violent offenders and those who are active in doing things such as spray painting the face of a 6-year-old child in the neighborhood, they need to be held into custody, no doubt. Nobody's saying they shouldn't. But we need to have alternatives to custody to properly manage. Thank you.
The United States has the highest custody rate in the world. I am absolutely against any expansion of system capacity in LA County. We need to spend more time, money, and effort on keeping our children and our community and our family members out of the jail. When my deputies do have to close the door, the cell door on somebody, I want them to be on the out, or when they close the door, I want our children to be on the outside. I don't want them to be on the inside. So if we do need to have people in jail, we need to better manage the population that is there. Like I said, people that simply suffer from addiction, people with mental illness, and the pretrial release will increase the ability to have people serve longer sentences, those that deserve it, without having to increase system capacity. Because once we do that, those beds are always going to need to be filled, the unions are going to want the jobs, and it's going to be a demand to fill it. And we can't keep growing like that. We need to be smart on crime.
Transit fare evasion makes up 26% of all youth citations from all law enforcement countywide. At up to $250 per ticket, it's the largest category for youth ticketed. Black youth made up 51% of sheriff fare evasion tickets in 2012. Would you support decriminalization of fare evasion? Mr. Helmold, your 2-minute response, please.
What we need to do to address that issue is be more assertive about the fare checks. See, what's unfair about this situation, and this is getting in the weeds of it, but this is where you truly need to understand your sheriff's department, who isn't just simply a patrol station, but you have custody, jail, courts, the rails, emergency preparedness, emergency operations. And one of those important components is the rail system, and you have to know it internally. What the problem is the way that riders on the rail system enter, they're not necessarily checked there. So it's not fair to randomly start picking people on the trains and then citing them for those large sites. This is almost encouraging profiling that occurs, racial profiling, things of that nature, and it's unacceptable. We need to have a better fare assessment and a better fare checking system. That's exactly how you would address that.
Thank you. I think this is where it's important where I, as an outsider, have a completely different perspective. The Sheriff's Department needs, when I'm the sheriff, is not going to be involved with the MTA. I know it's a great contract. Sometimes things are about things other than money, okay? The people that are best equipped to handle issues on the MTA or an MTA property are the local jurisdiction where that occurs. They're the ones that know the community, they know the people that are riding those forms of transportation, and that's really back to community-based policing. We don't need the Sheriff's Department acting almost as mercenaries on the MTA, coming in and doing fare evasions for tax, for revenue. And I don't think I need to tell anybody here about I only have 15 seconds, but we need to end the mass incarceration of our youth. For anybody that's read Michelle Alexander and the new Jim Crow, we know we need to stop that.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, your 1-minute response, please.
I've had many conversations with the MTA executives and board members about this very issue. The problem with this fare enforcement is the system design. Why the system was designed the way it is with no gates to go through and just open systems requires us to do the fare checks. The MTA management requires the Sheriff's Department as a provision of our contract to do that. And we're telling them that fares need to be checked when people come in so we can focus on the more serious crimes that are occurring on the line. I think it's good having one agency across the bus and the rail lines for continuity and for mission-specific purposes, but we do need to focus on those most serious issues. We have people who are afraid to ride public transportation. We need to be out there protecting them, giving them a sense of security, and underwriting our youth tickets.
Thank you. Mr. Olmsted, your 1-minute response, please.
Thank you. I think we need to go deep into the weeds on this one. Part of it is that you need to find out if this is area specific. Where is this occurring? What line? What area? What community? And then if you identify the particular problems in those communities, now it's important to reach out to the community because it's my problem. And I need to build that bridge back to the community. I need to work with the schools, the churches, the community leaders. And I need to ask them, this is what's going on. These are what the stats show in my particular area. And what are we going to do to handle this? What's the root cause? What's the bottom why and why all this stuff is occurring? And once we can reach down to that and figure out a way to bridge this and educate everyone as to the processes and what's required, then and only then are we going to be successful, but it's going to be up to me to reach out to make that bridge. I can't wait for them to come to me.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, your 1 minute response, please.
Thank you. As to the decriminalization of fare evasion, we have to look and see what you're doing. Basically, you're saying we have free transportation. Can the system support that? If that's something that can be sustained, then it's worth looking at. But right now, we have an honor system where there is an open architecture where people walk into the area where you catch the train, and they don't have to go through turnstiles. They don't have to go through a lot of the things that we see, generally speaking, in other cities. And it is on an honor system. We need to be able to look at this as a quality of life issue, to provide education, and then to provide enforcement where appropriate. I look at a potential for a hybrid model. I look at our own experiences in Long Beach, where we have the ability for Long Beach PD to be able to patrol the lines within the city, but to have the Sheriff's Department be able to provide the overarching ability to be able to look at it system-wide, to be able to respond outside cities or between cities. So some tremendous opportunities out there if we take a fresh look at this.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Vince. The Los Angeles Board of Supervisors recently approved a $5.5 billion plan to begin drawings on constructing a new women's jail. Considering the amount of over-incarceration in LA County, do you support constructing more jail space for historically low-level offenders such as women?
Like I said previously, I do not support building more jails. I mean, it's an inevitable fact that the jail system has been so dilapidated. There's going to have to be some refurbishment, some remodeling, etc. I think the perfect opportunity to do the community-based alternatives, to do pretrial release, to do all those things we've talked about here tonight, and I've talked about and I support, is with women, traditionally a low-risk situation. So I'm also perplexed that the Board of Supervisors continues to fancy themselves as criminal justice experts. We need to have a more holistic approach to the jail system. We've got to stop with these Band-Aids and these knee-jerk reactions, and we have this plan and we spend this money, and then okay, then it goes off into a committee somewhere and you never hear about it again. Or the Sheriff's Department is tasked with some project and nothing ever happens, nothing ever changes. The sheriff needs to be a leader, and not just Los Angeles County, but the state of California, to revamp the jail system so we stop having these same problems over and over again, especially with the management of the jails and the jail system. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, your 1 minute response, please.
This is a replacement facility. We're going to have females in our jail system. It's just a fact. And that's going to continue indefinitely. But what we don't need are facilities that aren't designed to facilitate having women maintain contact with their families, their children. This replacement facility will provide that opportunity. And what better way to provide an incentive to change lives, to turn their life around, to be serious about reentry and not coming back to jail, and having the opportunity to see what they're missing out with their children, and still having the opportunity to bond with them while they're in our custody. We're not there to punish people. The court system has already made the decision in terms of the level of incarceration or the debt to society that has to be paid. Our job is to provide a constitutional environment for people to serve their time and also maintain contact with their families. We are going to release them, and we want to release them in a better place than when they came in.
Thank you. Mr. Olmsted, your 1 minute response, please.
Thank you. I wouldn't be in favor of the $5.5 billion plan for the new women's jail. But the jail is going to have to be refurbished from a standpoint of bringing it up to community standards. And part of that is that the average education level for the male inside the men's central jail is about 4th grade. Women is about 6th. And what we need to have is more in-reach type programs. Those in-reach programs will allow us to go ahead and have the inmate, before they're released, fill out all the job applications, fill out for unemployment, job applications, and find out where mental health hospitals or treatment centers might be, and have this in-reach aspect be able to provide a better exit so that they don't have to re-enter into the program itself. And this community transition is absolutely critical in the process, and we just need to expand on that.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, your 1-minute response, please.
Thank you. As it relates to a new women's jail, I think that we need to take a look at it. If it needs to be replaced, it's not something we should continue to sustain. We need a facility that's appropriate and provides safe and secure housing for those that are in the facility. It needs to take into account the family situation. This was touched on before, and it was something that was absent in previous years to help ease that transition back into the family so that it's done in a productive way. As far as more jail space, we previously discussed this. We talked about the mental health issues, the drug addiction issues, community options for both for release, supervision, and monitoring. We have options that we haven't exercised already.
Thank you. Mr. Helmold, your 1-minute response, please.
It's important for your sheriff to truly understand the issues at hand, and I've already clearly stated that it would be my goal to reduce the jail population, but as it relates to the women's facility, this is an opportunity to transition women in other facilities that are more conducive to them not being broken apart from their families and having visitation in that way so their children are seeing them and doing that in a compassionate way. And it also allows us to close broken down facilities that have been a hub of violence, such as Men's Central Jail. So providing alternatives and allowing the jail population to be managed by putting our more violent offenders where currently the females are out now, because our women inmates are currently in facilities that are intended for complete lockdown, and that's not an appropriate way to treat a woman who has a child come visit them. So we need to understand what the real issue is at hand.
Thank you. We will now conclude with a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate. Mr. Vince, your closing statement, please.
Reforming the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department will be a monumental task in light of the many scandals that have rocked the department and the mismanagement that has gone on for far too long. We can't just trade one failed career manager for another. I am prepared to root out an entrenched attitude of resistance towards reform. When I'm sheriff, honest deputies will thrive, as I will institute an unyielding stance against secretive and deceptive conduct. I will rebuild the trust between Los Angeles County and its Sheriff's Department. Furthermore, I want to see the LA Sheriff's Department be far more than just a law enforcer or a jailer. It should be the shining light of 21st century policing for other agencies to look to, an agency that thrives on problem solving and innovation. Every community gets the type of law enforcement it insists on. So please help me help you get the type of law enforcement that you insist on from the Sheriff's Department. Please help me change the way things have always been done at the Sheriff's Department and elect me your next sheriff.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, your closing statement, please.
We will refocus on our core missions to make sure you're getting the service you deserve. We're going to establish internal accountability to make sure that the right message is being sent from the very top of the Sheriff's Department permeates